Hello dear students and viewers. We'll continue to talk about Form 5 Biology, Chapter 3, entitled Coordination and Response, and we will be discussing the spinal cord and reflex actions. So let's get started straight away. Now in the nervous system, we have the central nervous system and also the peripheral nervous system. We already studied about the brain, and so now we're going to discuss the other part of the central nervous system, which is the spinal cord. So the spinal cord is a cylindrical bundle of nerve fibers. They contain the neurons, all right? And a lot of them are the interneurons, okay? Within the vertebral canal, that means within the backbone. Backbone is made up of vertebra, small bones called vertebra. So the spinal cord is within the backbone, inside the neural canal, okay, which is a hollow part of the backbone. So it extends from the base of the brain here, right down to the lower part of the body, near to the buttocks region here, okay. Now the function of the spinal cord is that it transmits impulses from receptors that come in from the receptors, from the sensory organs like the skin, okay, and these impulses are then transmitted upwards, the spinal cord to the brain, and then the brain may send down some impulses through the spinal cord to the effectors in the body, like the muscles and the glands. So the spinal cord is the link between the brain and the peripheral nervous system, all these spinal nerves. Spinal cord links the brain to all these spinal nerves, okay, down below here. Let's discuss the position of the spinal cord in the vertebra or in the backbone. So the spinal cord is protected by the vertebrae, which are small bones that are joined together to form the backbone at the back of the body. Okay, we've studied that in chapter 2. So here in the neural canal of each vertebra, each vertebra is a small bone of the vertebral column, okay. So in each vertebra at the back here of the body, there is a neural canal, and the spinal cord is found inside here, okay. So this is a spinal cord. It is colored white and gray. That's all. Very boring colors for the nervous system. Later we'll find out why it's gray and white. So this is the position of the spinal cord, this one here, okay, this structure here, and it has two roots or two projections. One is called the dorsal root and the other is the ventral root, okay. And then the two roots will combine together to form one single structure where the spinal nerves are. So whatever is contained here is the spinal nerves on both sides of the body. So let's look at this view from here. It's actually called, if you look straight at the vertebra like this, it's actually from the top, like a bird flying overhead and looking down at you. That is called the superior view, okay. And if you are looking at the person, the person will look like this, right, with the shoes here and the body here and the head and the hair on top, okay. So if you look at the person from the back instead, it's called dorsal view, the back view. You look at the person face to face in front is the ventral view or the front view. So why do you have to learn dorsal and ventral view? Because you see there are two roots here or projections from the spinal cord. This one here is called the dorsal root that faces the back, more to the back, this one. And the one that faces to the front, more to the front, is the ventral root. That's how we get the words dorsal root and ventral root that projects out from the spinal cord. Here also dorsal root and ventral root in front, okay. Right, so I hope you understand this view. This position is from the top looking down on the person like this, and it's called the superior view. Right, so then what are the parts of the vertebra? Very briefly, I will just go through. This part is called the centrum. It is a bony structure that helps to support the body, and it will prevent any compression of the body. Then we have the transverse processes that sticks out at the side, and the spinous process sticks out at the back. All these processes are for the attachment of muscles, okay, for the vertebra. All right. So now we're going to look more closely at this spinal cord. Let us now discuss the structure and function of the spinal cord. If you look at the spinal cord of a person from the front view, let's say you can see the spinal cord, then you will see it as a cylinder of cells, extending from the base of the brain right down near to the lower parts of the body. So here we see the cross section of the spinal cord if you are looking at it a bit from the top. So you can see that it has gray matter inside it, and it's shaped like a butterfly, and white matter around it. So the gray matter actually consists of cell bodies of neurons, like the efferent neuron and the interneuron. The cell bodies are inside here, and it causes the area here to be gray because the cytoplasm and nuclei are grayish in color. And then the white matter is actually consists of the axons with the myelin sheaths, which are whitish in color. Okay, so gray matter and white matter. And now let's look at the spinal nerves. Spinal nerves are nerves that extend out from the spinal cord. But before that, there are two roots. Actually, these two parts are separated, the roots. And then the two roots are the dorsal root at the back, okay, and the ventral root nearer to the front of the person. That's why it's called ventral root. Dorsal root is more to the back, more to the back part of the person where the vertebral column is. Now we can label and identify as the dorsal root because it has a swelling. Dorsal root always have a swelling which we call ganglion. All right, and the ventral root does not have. Okay, doesn't have the ganglion. So the dorsal and ventral root will combine together to form this structure, which contains the spinal nerves, right, on both sides of the body, on the right side of the person and the left side of the person. So altogether, from the neck until the lower part of the body, there are 31 pairs of the spinal nerves. One pair it means that there's the left side, or rather the right side of the person, and on the left side of the person, the two spinal nerves here are called a pair of spinal nerves. Okay, so there are 31 pairs from the neck onwards down to the lower part of the body, okay, near the pelvic region. Okay, so spinal nerves project out from the spinal cord. It has two roots. The dorsal root at the back here contains efferent neuron. Okay, we'll look at that afterwards. And also the ganglion. I almost said ganglion, so it's ganglion. Okay, so ganglion, the swelling or the bulge is at the dorsal root. Ventral root contains efferent neuron. Now, ventral root here contains the efferent neuron that extends out to the effectors. Okay, we'll look at the diagram again afterwards. Now, the function of the spinal cord is to control reflex actions such as knee jerk. This is a common question. Please memorize this, the function of the spinal cord. F stands for function. And the second function is it transmits impulses from receptors to the brain and from the brain to effectors. Thus, it links the brain to the peripheral nervous system, and that is the spinal nerves. And then from the peripheral nervous system, it links the brain actually to the receptors and effectors. So you can just state the statement here. if you ask for the second function of spinal cord. Okay, it transmits impulses from receptors to brain and from brain to effectors. Now let's look at the structure of the spinal cord. Cross-section with the neurons in here, and this should be quite familiar by now because we have discussed it in the video on the neurons. Okay, but we'll go through all the parts, and this diagram is very important. If you can, just screenshot it or pause the video and try to draw it into your notebook to get the training, because in the learning outcomes, now these are the learning outcomes, you have to be able to draw and label a diagram of the cross section of the spinal cord and then state the main functions of the spinal cord. This one has been done in the previous discussion, okay, just now. Now then we'll have a look. Draw and label a diagram of the cross section of the spinal cord. So let's see where the parts are. So this is the spinal cord, right in the center here. So we must draw the butterfly shaped center, that is the gray matter, okay, and the parts surrounding it are all the white matter. Next, we can fill in the neurons. So the first neuron is the afferent neuron, which is linked to or connected to receptors. Now in this case, the afferent neuron, its nerve endings here can also act as a receptor to detect stimuli, like the pain receptors are the nerve endings of the neuron, okay, of the afferent neuron. So, but other than that, sometimes it is linked to some receptor or specialized cells. Here, the nerve endings act as the receptors for pain. So, the afferent neuron from the nerve endings here, which will trigger an impulse if, let's say, there is a stimulus, like a pinprick, okay, will cause pain. So the stimulus is pain, and it will be detected by the pain receptors, and then this will trigger an impulse in the afferent neuron, and the afferent neuron will bring it into the spinal cord. The impulse will be transmitted. Okay, let's use the word transmitted. Afferent neuron transmits the impulse to the spinal cord. Okay, then the interneuron here will receive the impulse and transmit it to the efferent neuron, the third neuron. Efferent neuron will transmit the impulse. This is the axon. So through the axon to the effector, like the muscles in the arms. So maybe it's the biceps muscle. So if the muscle receives, when the muscle receives the impulse, it will contract. When it contracts, the hand is withdrawn from the object, which is the pin that caused the pain, and that is the response. Okay, that's the response of the person. So you can see here the connection between the various parts, and you can be asked to explain a reflex action, like withdrawing the hand from an object that causes pain, or from a hot object, okay, that is hot, and the stimulus will be the heat. Okay, so we can try a question on this afterwards. Although we have not studied reflex actions in detail, this is one type of reflex action, withdrawing hand from an object that causes pain, or from a hot object. It's called reflex action because it is quick and automatic, and it occurs without conscious thinking, and it's a response to a stimulus. So this type of reflex action, it occurs quickly without us having to think, about what's going on. It just occurs immediately, and it is meant to prevent us from getting harmed, okay, prevent us from getting into danger. Another word that you will have to learn, another term, is synapse. What is a synapse? A synapse is a gap between two neurons. The neurons do not touch each other. There's a tiny little gap between them, okay, between, for example, the axon terminals of the afferent neuron and the cell body, or the dendrites and dendrons of the next neuron. Okay, there's a tiny gap. So at this tiny gap, the impulse will use a chemical means to cross the synapse, which we will study later on. Okay, so here also I want to emphasize how to draw these three neurons, because in the exam they can give you a picture of the spinal cord that's empty, have no neurons drawn, and you may be asked to draw all the neurons inside. So you must know that the structure of the afferent neuron is such that the cell body is in the ganglion, all right, and this front part here is actually the dendron, and after that this is the axon. Okay, because dendron brings the impulse or transmits the impulse towards the cell body, axon transmits the impulse away from cell body. So that's the cutting point here, the dividing point between dendron on this side and axon on this side. Okay, so anyway, the first one, the afferent neuron, can be drawn going in through the ganglion and draw the cell body. A simplified form of the cell body is just a circle with a dot. This represents the cell body with the cytoplasm and the nucleus. And then draw a few of the axon terminals here, and then draw the second neuron, this is the interneuron, a circle with a dot. And the dendrons are too small to draw here. You can draw a few tiny lines here. And then this is the axon of the interneuron. And then on to the last neuron, which is the efferent neuron. Again, you can draw a few tiny lines if you want to draw the dendrons, which are very short. And then draw a long axon leading to the effector, like the muscle or gland. That's how you draw it. And then always have the synapse, or the gap between one neuron and the other. Okay. Now lastly, concerning the spinal cord and the flow of impulse, you may be asked to draw the direction of the impulse. Okay, so you must draw the arrows to show that the impulse is transmitted by the afferent neuron to the spinal cord, and then this one is from the interneuron. This arrow shows that it is transmitted from afferent neuron to interneuron, and then to efferent neuron, and then out of the ventral root, and then to the effectors, which is the muscle or glands. Okay, that is the direction of impulse, which you may be asked to draw in a reflex action. So you can draw a few arrows to show the direction of flow of impulse. Here are some useful notes that you can jot down and use for revision. They are short and sweet. I call them smart notes, and they get straight to the point. So we just now talked about the spinal cord, and here we are going to jot down the parts and the content. Okay, the parts of the spinal cord and what is in them. So gray matter consists of cell bodies of neurons, such as the interneurons and the efferent neurons. In this part here, the gray matter is like a butterfly-shaped structure, and in the part here, you have the interneurons and efferent neurons with the cell bodies. Okay, so it's gray in color because of the grayish color of the cell body. White matter instead consists of axons of neurons with the white myelin sheaths, which have a fatty substance that is whitish in color. So white matter surrounds the gray matter, and for example, the efferent neuron found here that has an axon that goes out through the ventral root. This is the ventral root. Efferent neuron is here, placed here. So its axon here has the white myelin sheaths. Okay, and that causes it to have the white color. It's called the white matter. Now dorsal root. Dorsal root is this root here which has a swelling. Once you see the swelling, you know it's the dorsal root. See the bulge here. Contains the afferent neuron. Okay, so afferent neuron, okay, is found here, and in fact the cell body of afferent neuron is in the dorsal root swelling here, which is called the ganglion. Okay, so dorsal root contains afferent neuron and ventral root instead contains the efferent neuron. Okay, but in the end, both the afferent and efferent neuron will combine, will be in the same spinal nerve. Okay, both together, but they will branch out to different. They will transmit impulses to different places. Okay, not to the same place. After that, so ventral root contains the efferent neuron. How to remember these two? Remember DIF. D for dorsal root contains A, afferent neuron. V for ventral root contains efferent neuron. Okay. Now ganglion is a swelling in the dorsal root here. And sometimes you can be asked, what does it contain? So it contains a group of the cell bodies of afferent neurons. The cell body is found here because the cell body is at the side of the whole cell. So it has to be placed somewhere here in the ganglia. Lastly, let's try this question, which is a forecast question for exam. Based on the diagram below, explain the transmission of impulse that causes a reflex action to occur. So study the diagram carefully and see what is happening and what the reflex action can be. A reflex action is a very quick automatic response to a stimulus without conscious thought. Okay? So here we see a nail pricking the skin, right? And then here you see 3 types of neurons, right? And the third type of neuron is attached to a muscle. So what is the reflex action? Yes, if the hand was pricked by a nail, then the hand withdraws. That means the hand is pulled back from the object that caused the pain. Okay? From the object that caused the pain, the hand is pulled back. So now, before we start, you have to plan your answer and read the question again. Explain the transmission of impulse that causes the reflex action, the withdrawing of the hand. So transmission of impulse means starting from the receptor here, right? How the impulse will flow or how it's transmitted until the reflex action occurs, which is the withdrawal of the hand from the object that caused the pain. So to start off, you can label the parts here first to see what you need to include in your answer, because you have to base your answer on the diagram. So whatever you see, you can label, and try to use it in your answer. Okay? And secondly, we have to remember the acronym that we have used before to help us write a good essay with all the components there. So do you remember the acronym that we use for transmission of impulses? Yes, it's SRI, ABI or ASI, EMR. And here we use ASI, the S stands for the spinal cord. Okay? Only the spinal cord is involved, not the brain. So it's not ABI. You see, the transmission of impulse is going through the spinal cord only. It didn't go up to the brain yet, but it will later on when the eyes see what's happening, and then, the person becomes aware of what's happening. But that's after the reflex action has occurred usually. So this type of reflex action is meant to be very fast. So it travels only through the spinal cord and doesn't go up to the brain yet. This is to make it fast so that the person can react and move his hand away from the object that may harm him. Okay, it's to protect the person from harm. So please take some time to just think about the answer and write down an answer for this question, as practice makes perfect. You can use this acronym to help you recall all the different components. And you cannot remember, you can refer back to the first video on coordination, coordination part 1 to review it. Sorry, coordination part 2. Okay? So I will, you can stop the video or pause the video for a while and then try to think up your answer. And we'll come back to the answer afterwards. Now let's look at the answer. Okay? Based on the diagram, explain the transmission of impulse that causes the reflex action to occur. The reflex action is withdrawing, menarik tangan, withdrawing the hand from an object that causes pain or a hot object. But in this case, it's the object that causes pain because it's a pin. So 10 marks. So let's start to answer this question based on our acronym. Now, S here stands for what? Stimulus. So the stimulus is the what caused by the pain? Yes, the pain caused by the pin. Okay. R is for receptor. Okay, so what is the receptor? Yes, the pain receptor in the skin generates or triggers a I for what? Nerve impulse when it detects the stimulus. Next, A is for what? What neuron? Afferent neuron transmits the impulse to the S. Yes, it's the spinal cord, the reflex center in the spinal cord. Okay, now I is what? Interneuron, correct? The second type of neuron transmits the impulse from afferent neuron to E. E is for efferent neuron. Next, what transmits the impulse from spinal cord to the next destination? Okay, the first one is efferent neuron, transmits the impulse from spinal cord to the next E is for effector. Okay, that is the M for, yes, the muscles. But which muscle is it? What type of muscle is it? Skeletal muscles of the hand. And as a response, what is the response? The hand what? Withdraws. Withdraws means to be pulled back from the pin. Right, so this ends our session for today. And thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll be going faster from this point on and try to finish up neurons in a short time. And then after that, we will discuss hormones and so on. Okay? So goodbye for now.